I was successful. I was being paid well. And when I finished Family Affairs, my first audition was for Coronation Street. And then I got that. And it was just like, I just felt like, oh, right, life's just going to happen to me. I loved going to bars, loved going to pubs, but it wasn't really affecting my day-to-day life. I just was trying to kind of live as many days as possible like I was at a wedding. The hair of the dog, it really, I think, is the most destructive element of alcohol addiction. That was the beginning of my demise, because once my brain learnt that it could deal with the effects of a hangover by ingesting more of the thing that caused it, then that's where the spiral starts. That's when I started realizing that I was no longer drinking for fun. I was drinking to try and feel normal. And it was in these moments of like horrible pain, like just you feel like you're going to die, and just thinking, I've got to stop. I had no regrets. I didn't miss any aspect of it. In fact, quite the contrary. I just, when you look in hindsight and say, I was avoiding being around my children absolutely, in pursuit of this nonsensical poison. There are no good qualities to alcohol for me, and good riddance.
Welcome to School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist and a recovery coach who's been in recovery many years, and I know firsthand that rock bottom can be the greatest teacher and the springboard for a beautiful life. And as you know, I invite fellow creatives and all inspiring people who have hit rock bottom, survived and thrived. This is a podcast of hope and how to get out of the darkness into the light. And that's why I'm so excited today, because I've got the resplendent Rupert Hill in the studio.
Thank you. Resplendent. Wow.
It's really good to see you, Rupert.
It's good to see you. Very good to see you.
Been 20 years?
It's been a while, hasn't it? We went to the same university and we used to knock about together a little bit. A few boozy evenings I think we've had together.
One or two.
But here we are.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you.
You too.
Really, really is. And if you don't know who Rupert is, which I'm sure you do, well, shame on you, but you're about to now. So Rupert Hill, quick bio. Rupert Hill studied drama at Middlesex and pursued acting, appearing in TV shows like Holby City, Coronation Street, and recently Whitstable Pearl. He's been in over 15 stage productions, including directing the full Monty. He acted in horror films like Awaiting, directed his own films like Leatherhead, and won Best Actor at the Manchester Liftoff Festival. His debut play, HUSK, about alcohol addiction, will be staged in September at Hope Mill Theatre. He also directs drama school showreels, co-owns pubs in Manchester's Northern Quarter, and lives in Chorlton. For the full biography, head for the show notes, because there's a lot more to Rupert, so go there right now. Rupert, I've obviously asked you on because you're a brilliant creative, but also because you've had a rock bottom or maybe 2 or 3 in your life. And I know that served as a catalyst for positive change in your life. And I just wondered if we could start there, and from there we'll get into the hope and the recovery and the joy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from quite a young age, I sort of idolized alcohol as a kind of, like, I remember seeing my parents at dinner parties or whatnot, and I was kind of I remember being kind of fascinated by alcohol, and like, this is what grown-ups seem to be into. I could tell that everyone was kind of, this was the big thing, and then I had my first drink at about 14, something like that, and I remember just immediately being into it, and then that carried on, and we were at university in the 90s, and it was just like kind of par for the course, wasn't it, that everyone was just getting drunk all the time, and Oasis and Blur were singing about it, and Born Slippy with Lager. It was just the vibe of the 90s and the early 2000s that this was, hedonism was kind of the new cool, and my favorite film at the time was With Nell and I, and it was just, I was just kind of obsessed with it as a thing, and I was always all right on it. I never got aggressive, or, well, not never, but I mean, in general, I could, I was quite a happy drunk and quite affable, and it, I just carried on, and I was a big drinker, but managed to have a career as an actor. And then when I started running pubs, again, could be the life and soul of the party. And then, fairly recently, 3 years ago this July, I just totally lost control of the situation. And I guess it was the inevitable outcome of a kind of pursuit with alcohol, and that the party had to end, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, we were just reminiscing, weren't we, over a coffee about your career trajectory after leaving uni, and it's amazing that all of that happened, because I wouldn't have known, a lot of that, from the outside, because you got, it seemed from my perspective, success really quickly. You did a lot of soaps early on. I think you were in Family Affairs, and then you were in Coronation Street for quite a long time as well, weren't you?
Yeah, it did happen quite quick. I remember graduating, and then I had like a year of signing on, and it was desolate. And you go from that kind of insular kind of camaraderie at drama school or university, where you feel kind of like you're getting parts in plays and you're doing stuff and people are constantly seeing you act and you feel wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you go out into the real world and it's just a desolate desert of unemployment. And so that was a bit of a shock to the system, but then started getting the odd advert and the odd job, and I was working as a barman alongside this, and I was drinking pretty heavily at the time. And I remember when I got the call from my agent about Family Affairs, which was my first like long running job where I could give up being a barman, and the people I worked with were just gobsmacked that I'd managed to get a proper job like that, because they just saw me as a kind of party animal.
Right.
And then from then on, I sort of was lucky enough to be just a professional actor for a good 15, 20 years.
It's amazing. And obviously you still are as well.
Yeah.
What role did alcohol play in those sort of early years of your career, if any, sort of during Family Affairs and maybe Coronation Street?
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, I was a big drinker, but I was fine. I kept it under control, and it was kind of like you do the job and then you'd go out and we'd go clubbing and we'd do all that, and it was just like a kind of, I suppose, normal. I mean, but heavy, you know what I mean? Like I loved going out, I loved going to bars, loved going to pubs, but it wasn't really affecting my day-to-day life. And obviously, you're kind of, you feel bulletproof, don't you, in your 20s? You just kind of feel like you're going to live forever. So I just sort of coasted through life, and I was successful. I was being paid well, and when I finished Family Affairs, my first audition was for Coronation Street, and then I got that, and it was just like, I just felt like, oh right, life's just going to happen to me, and I'm not going to have to do much about it. And I just took it all for granted a little bit, and the parties got longer and the nights got longer, and it just sort of escalated, I suppose.
So your relationship with alcohol at that point, would you say it was all about just having fun and just unwinding? It didn't really serve any other purpose. It was just about having a good time.
Yeah, it was never destructive for me. Well, it was, I mean, clearly, but it never, at that time, it never felt destructive. Like I wasn't like, I didn't unleash an inner demon. It wasn't like I was trying to drink myself into a hole, or like I was depressed or anything. It was just, I just correlated happiness and joy with alcohol, and so going out was, the elixir of life, and it was just kind of pursuit of fun. I remember saying that I just was trying to kind of live as many days as possible like I was at a wedding, where you have a drink in the morning and no one cares, or like when you're at a festival, you have a drink at 9 a.m, no one minds. And so I just kind of thought, I was always a bit like that. I wasn't drinking in the morning every day, which is what I ended up doing, but I would do if it happened that I had a drink first thing in the morning. It wouldn't bother me. I'd just be like, yeah, it's rock and roll, or I thought that I arrogantly thought I don't have to commit to the rules that boring people in society have to live by. I can live my own kind of existence, and yeah.
I relate to all of that. I mean, sort of, obviously that era we were at uni together, and that culture with Nell and I, and all that sort of romanticism around drinking and being an actor and being a creative and all of that, and just using alcohol as a means to have fun. I was quite aware of its power in my 20s when my career started to go somewhere, and I used to just ring fence it for me in the weekend. I thought, right, I can drink as much as I want on the weekend, but Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday, I never touched it, or on a Sunday, because I was aware of that power that it had. When did it start creeping into work more, or negatively, or maybe it didn't? Did it start to sort of infiltrate work?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So it just, I suppose, it's incremental changes that happen, and you just kind of push the boundaries ever so slightly further. And so I remember being on tour, doing a play on tour, and when you've done a play 100 times, you just feel like you can do it in your sleep. So I remember and it was quite a hedonistic tour, and we were going out after the show and getting hammered, and then I was waking up hungover and going to the fridge and just having a beer just to kind of take the edge off. And then that sort of happened more and more, and since I've read a lot about it, and your body learns, that the hair of the dog, it really, I think, is the most destructive element of alcohol addiction. And it's all very fun, like I said, when you're at a festival or at a wedding or at and people say, oh, have a hair of the dog, it will sort you out. And it's always been kind of like a kind of playful, like bantery, gone hair of the dog, hair of the dog. In hindsight, that was the demise. That was the beginning of my demise, because once my brain learnt that it could deal with the effects of a hangover by ingesting more of the thing that caused it, then that's where the spiral starts, and that's, I got totally sucked in. So as soon as I started using hair of the dog more and more frequently, it got to the point where it became a kind of compulsion, and if I woke up with a hangover, I wouldn't even think about it. I would just have to have a drink as soon as possible, just to get rid of that feeling. And I suppose that's when I started realizing that I was no longer drinking for fun. I was drinking to try and feel normal. Yeah. And obviously that's insane.
Yeah. Oh my God. So much identification there. I mean, I know one book that really helped you was Alcohol Explained by William Porter. And I'll put that in the show notes. And it talks about that withdrawal process, I think, in a lot of detail. So the brain is sort of learning, the euphoria, in inverted commas, of drinking. But then when it goes into withdrawal, it's learning that it can overcome the withdrawal with the drink, the hair of the dog. So it's sort of learning that it's good for both. And obviously that's how it can then sort of snowball. Yeah. That's exactly what I did. I always say the same thing. That was the beginning of the end for me, because I used to ring fence it into the weekend. And on that Sunday, I'd be in the pub for years, and people would say, I'm having a hair of the dog, and I'd say no, because I thought, God, this is a slippery slope. And then one day, it took me about a decade to have it, believe it or not, at that point. I mean, at uni I would have done. But when it was progressing, and I had that hair of the dog, and then before I knew it, it was Thirsty Thursdays, and then it was Happy Hump Wednesday, and then it was Tipsy Tuesday. Like my weekends just got longer, and it was always at that point that I'd measure it the same place as well.
Yeah.
That hair of the dog.
Yeah. And also, as soon as you have that hair of the dog, as soon as you take it, then that's the rest of your day is already planned out. You can't change your plans once you start. And that was the other thing I had, is that it was just, as soon as you have that first drink in the morning, then the rest of the day can only go one way. And it means that tomorrow you'll be back where you are. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And really your brain is doing the most sensible thing. It's going, I can sense that you have physical pain, and I've figured out a way of alleviating it, getting rid of it. So your brain is doing the sensible thing by telling you to have another drink. And it becomes like hunger or thirst. If you're really hungry, like properly hungry or properly thirsty, you have an overwhelming, uncontrollable urge to eradicate that uncomfortable feeling, and that's what it did, and then it was
And did that progression go the way I'm thinking it went? I'm sort of imagining that at the beginning, maybe hair of the dog was, I don't know, a beer or a drink, or maybe two. Did it then progress that you were drinking throughout the day, or would it stop at that hair of the dog in the morning?
No, that's what I mean by it would dictate the rest of the day. So, right. I mean, I was very high functioning as a drinker. So I would wake up, I've got two kids, and I would get up early and I would probably have a drink just to sort myself out. But then I would make their packed lunches to take to school. I was an expert at coming up with excuses as to why I couldn't drive them to school. I would say, no, we shouldn't, because of climate change. We should walk, or I'll take them on the bikes, or whatever it may be. And then drop the kids off at school. And then because I owned pubs, I could invent meetings and shifts to go. I could invent ways to go to the pub because I owned them. And then that would be a drink. Or if I had an acting job, then I could go and do that. And, I might rehearse a play. And then in the lunch break, people would be like, oh, do you want to come and get some lunch? And I'd be like, no, I've got to make a phone call. So I'd nip off, get far enough away from the rehearsal room, have 2 beers, buy some chewing gum or brush my teeth somewhere, come back, and then straight after rehearsal back to, just... It's exhausting. You have to plan your day. You have to plan, if my wife said to me, let's take the kids to a theme park, I would be then like going online, checking the theme park to see if it had a bar. Oh. And if it didn't, I'd figure a way out of not going, wow. Because I'd be like, I can't not have a drink nearby.
Yeah.
So it was just exhausting trying to plan your life around.
Would you carry it around as well? Would you sort of have it on your person, or?
Yeah. I've done radio plays where I've had a water bottle full of red wine,
right?
And just really dangerous as well, because if I got caught doing that, you probably never work again. Certainly with that director or that production company, and it was just. And I'd always make sure that I had what I needed in the vicinity, either in my backpack or, wherever I was going. I just, incessant planning. It was, people think that alcoholics are sloppy, but they're not. I think they're very, very meticulous in their planning.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
What would it, for someone that doesn't understand sort of alcohol addiction, so, going back to when you described and having that hair of the dog, what would make you want that hair of the dog in the morning? Did it just feel like an automatic compulsion, or were you like going into sort of anxiety and panic? What was going on in your head, and what would that first drink give you?
Yeah, it was a compulsion for sure. And there was no joy in it or fun or anything. It was just, I want this uncomfortable feeling to go away. And it wouldn't even be like, when some people are hungover and they're like, oh my God, I feel like nauseous. I feel like I'm going to be sick. It wasn't even like that. It was just, I don't feel right. And I want to feel right. So I can't put my finger on it, but it just became this like, I'm asthmatic, and I guess it's a bit like, you can't breathe properly. So you have some Ventolin and that alleviates. It's just like that, just sort of alleviating this slight uncomfortable feeling that things aren't quite right in the world,
I mean, what you said is so true. I mean, there was a big study a couple of years ago in the States around alcohol use disorder, and only 9% of this study found only 9% of people with that severe alcohol use disorder as well were drinking every single day. So that kind of stereotype, like you said, of the alcoholic who's sort of passed out on the street, who's lost everything, who's eaten out of a skip or a bin, is actually the minority.
Yeah.
The majority of people are either binging or very high functioning. I mean, I was quite surprised in our chat before when you said, you were drinking in the middle of the night, because, for it to get to that point, where it's really waking you up in the middle of the night, that must have been really scary. I can relate to that, by the way, pouring a drink in the middle of the night. It's a scary place to be, isn't it? Yeah, again, with Alcohol Explained, the William Porter book, it was reassuring to me that this is quite a common thing, because you feel very alone when you don't realize that there's a kind of recovery community out there. But I felt very alone, and I thought I knew some people drank in the morning, but, in my head it was like tramps, or like, people are absolutely at rock bottom. And, like I said, I was really high functioning. And the weird thing was, the middle of the night drinking was just to get back to sleep again. So I would always wake up at like 1 o'clock, say, and then I would get up, go downstairs, open 2 beers with a tea towel over the ring pull to so no one would hear. Yeah. And quite often a couple of glasses of wine as well. And it would be my way of getting back to sleep again.
but it soon became my favorite drink of the day because I was totally alone. The house was completely silent and I was just alone with, it is the ultimate sort of love affair. It really feels like an affair, drinking. And, it was like just me and my lover, if you like, alone and in complete silence. And yeah, I ended up really liking those moments, but obviously it was horrific,
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, how did you conceal it from your family, or didn't you? Were they aware of what was going on for a while, or were you able to hide it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people close to me knew that I drank a lot, but because I wasn't aggressive or maudlin, and I was functioning, I kind of developed a way of drinking all day without getting smashed. So I never like blacked out really, and I rarely like was up at like 4 a.m. or anything. I just tended to drink all day long, with little breaks in between, and try to sort of sustain a level of drunk that was sustainable. And then I could go home, and if I was going home for the evening, I could speak to my kids and my wife and drink a glass of wine, but look like I was all right. So I could obviously handle it. But then when I gave up and I told the doctor how much I was drinking, and it was 14 to 18 units a day, I think it was, and my doctor said that's like a fatal level of alcohol consumption. That at any moment your organs could shut down, based on that. And it was a real wake up, because I was just like, oh, I thought I was kind of in control of that. But clearly not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of stigmas and stereotypes around alcoholism and addiction. We know that 1 in 8 people that drink alcohol will become alcohol dependent, because alcohol in and of itself is addictive. But sometimes there's this idea that it's always about trauma, that it's always about mental health, and it's always about all these other things. But alcohol in itself can cause alcoholism, and I don't think that's talked about enough.
No.
And the stats kind of say that sort of around 2 in 3 people have got pre-existing mental health problems or maybe trauma. But then there's another big group of people that don't. We were talking about this before, weren't we? You didn't really have any other mental health issues. Did you find that as your alcoholism progressed, that you started to get some that you didn't have before? I mean, specifically, you said that you were using alcohol to have a good time and go out, but it sounds like that changed and it started potentially causing mental health issues, or not. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so when I did go into counselling when I gave up, and I really enjoyed it, and I wasn't, I don't think anyone just drinks to have a good time. I mean, I think there's a spectrum of happiness and unhappiness, and we're all on it somewhere, and we go up and down, and so in counselling I learned a lot about myself just from talking. I found it really, really useful actually, and I clearly wasn't as happy as I thought I might be, but I just never, because there are other people, there are some people who are so much worse off than I am. I felt like it would be arrogant or kind of disgusting to sort of think that I had like mental health problems or anything like that. But I think everybody does to a degree. So yeah, I suppose the drinking, it was much more the physical aspect of alcohol. I mean, as we talked about, the reason why I like talking about the fact that I've given up alcohol is because I think, a lot of creatives and actors might be put off from announcing that they've given up alcohol, because I think there's a sort of stigma. There might be a stigma with it, and that you don't want people to think you're a fuck up, or do you know what I mean? Like but I was like, no, I'm going to tell everyone, because I want, then if it's out there and I decide to go back to it, then I have to own that. And so I got a tattoo on my arm which says free, which is on my drinking hand. So every time I drink, I remind
brilliant.
myself that I'm free of the prison of alcohol. And I wanted to be proud of the fact that I'd given up, because I think it's the best thing I've ever done with my life. And I am proud of myself, and I'm proud of you for what you did. And every time I meet someone who says they've given up, I'm like, they need to be celebrated. And if someone gives up cigarettes, we pat them on the back and say, well done, that's really, really good. And with alcohol, people are like, why? Oh, do you not miss it? Do you not, is life not boring? And, you're just like, no, you should be saying well done.
Yeah.
Because it's a hell of an achievement. And you've this sort of drug that is so widely celebrated in almost every aspect of society. Giving up something like that is really difficult, and I think it should be celebrated, and people should be proud of it.
100%, totally agree with that. Going back to you being an actor, I just wondered what you thought how that played a part in your story with alcohol. Do you think it's inconsequential, the fact that you're in the industry and you're a creative? How do you think it might have made it more likely that you would have used alcohol more regularly? And is it a factor in you giving up? I know that's a very loaded question. I just wondered if the industry and being an actor kind of, I don't know, makes this a bit more likely to hit the bottle a bit more.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that you certainly meet a lot of people who have had problems with alcohol. And I guess, if you're fortunate enough to be reasonably successful as an actor, then you have the kind of disposable income that you need to sustain, drinking every day. But you also have periods on and off work, and quite often if you're an actor, you'll just be needed for one scene if you're doing TV or film, or you might just be needed to do a photo shoot here, and then a voiceover here, and a radio play, and it's kind of bitty, and you can definitely orchestrate drinking around that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And you can hide it. I mean, I got to the point where I was going on stage after drinking, and there was one time in particular where I was doing a really kind of prestigious show with a prestigious director, and I went on stage one day, and I'd had enough that I was half cut for sure. And afterwards, the director said to me, "Can I have a word with you?" And I was like, "Okay, here we go. My cover's blown. I'm in trouble." And she said, "Oh, you were really, really good tonight. It was fantastic."
Right.
And then that validated my choices, and then from then on, I kind of had the arrogance of, well, I can. In fact, the drink's probably helping. So then I started drinking pretty much every time before I went on stage, because I thought it just makes me a better performer.
Wow.
And since giving up, I have realized that in actual fact, it's been a long time since I've taken the craft of being an actor seriously, and I've almost started relearning what it is to be an actor, and the fact that we talked about this before, that there is, when you give up, there is a real sense of being present again.
100%.
And that was overwhelming, actually. This idea of like every time just seemed to slow down, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm present.
Yeah.
And being with my children was just like, I had this like invigorating, joyous kind of feeling inside of like, oh, I'm not planning where the drinks are. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm just enjoying being present. And then I realized that this is such an important part of being an actor as well, is that, you need to be present. You need to be alive behind the eyes. Quite often I think I was dead behind the eyes, and I was going to auditions hungover or half cut and not taking the job seriously. And then all of a sudden I feel like I'm starting again a little bit. And I have a kind of newfound love of the craft of acting. And I just kind of hope I am fortunate enough to have the opportunities to keep going with it, because I feel like I'm almost starting again.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I mean, I think it's one of the huge benefits in my recovery has been, it's just transformed my career in a totally different way. What about on a sort of, it's an obvious question in a way, but sort of on a family level? I mean, it must have had a really positive impact, on your family and your children and your wife, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. I mean, obviously I love my wife and I love my children, and always have. the what I realized was I was deliberately trying to avoid them when I was drinking heavily, and it wasn't from a lack of love. It was just the alcohol is always top of the pile. You know what I mean? If you've got a relationship with alcohol, it will always win over everyone else. Nothing is as important as the drinking. So I started avoiding them a lot because they represented sobriety, really, and I wanted to be drunk as much as possible. So they didn't factor into it. So when I gave up, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm really enjoying reading a bedtime story to my daughter. I'm really enjoying being at home. I find conversations with my two girls stimulating and really interesting, and I find conversations with drunk people quite dull now, and I find it quite difficult to be around. You don't realize how much people repeat themselves when they drink, and I was one of them. And I think I have this overwhelming feeling of I just had the same evening over and over and over again. Right. You know, that's what drinking is kind of like. You just you feel like when you're doing it, you feel like it's really exciting and a really varied kind of rock and roll, high energy, high octane lifestyle. But in hindsight, you're like, oh no, it was just the same night over and over again.
Something that people are really fearful of about giving up is this idea that alcohol gave them a persona or drugs gave them a persona. And for some people, it's quite an easy payoff because people are like, well, no one liked me. Everyone hated me when I was drunk. It sounds like with you, it was the opposite. That actually, you know, you were very pleasant. Was there a bit of fear around even, will my wife still like me? Or, you know, your close friends or the people you work with? Was there a bit of fear about that? Or,
I mean, I think I surrounded myself with a lot of like-minded drinkers, you know. And I suppose if you've always presented yourself in that way, you know, like everyone that knows me knows that I'm a drinker. And, you know, I think even my wife, who was kind of aware that I was overdoing it, but then she was probably like, but he always has done. And so, you know, it might be difficult for me to start saying, you know, start giving ultimatums about how much you drink when you've always done it. You know, it's really hard. And I think the problem is with drinkers, they kind of need to help themselves. And the more you say to someone, I think you're drinking too much, or like, are you drunk? Or, you know, I used to get quite annoyed by that. If my wife said to me, you're pissed, aren't you? And I'd get quite defensive, and you know, I didn't like it. I didn't like being challenged. Yeah. So in the end, you know, I think with most addictions, I'm assuming it really is about trying to help that first step is really about helping yourself and saying, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this running the show.
Is that what kind of broke the straw of the camel's back? I think I just made that up and got that whole catchphrase completely wrong. But the straw that broke the camel's back. There you go. That's what I was after. You know, one word that you used when I was asking you for a little bit of backstory, and when we were chatting before we met up today, is this word unsustainable. You said it was no longer sustainable. It became unsustainable. Is that kind of the point where you went, something's got to change? What in particular would you describe as unsustainable for you in that moment?
So as I said, I got to the point where it was every morning, and then that would dictate my day. Auditions were becoming harder and harder, and I wasn't getting the jobs, you know what I mean? And I was like, I knew that I was half cut or really hungover when I was doing self-tapes or in-person auditions, but the drink was always winning, and I needed more and more, and that drinking in the middle of the night, sometimes it didn't work, and sometimes I couldn't get back to sleep. And I remember like once where I'd have my usual couple of beers and I wasn't tired, and then I'd have a glass of wine and I wasn't tired, and then I'd have another glass of wine and I still felt uncomfortable, and I was like, this isn't working. I'm not getting back to sleep. And then before you know it, you've done a bottle of wine in the middle of the night, and then then you're like, well, now the morning, and then all of a sudden my hangover would become so intensely painful. It was all, I was like bedridden, and I was like, well, I've got some sort of alcohol poisoning now. And my wife, bless her, would tell the kids that, you know, Daddy's not well, he's got flu or whatever it might be. And I would just be in bed all day, you know, like shaking. It would be, you know, those moments of real pain, like absolutely real. So
the
pain.
Physical addiction came in as well for you as well.
Yeah. Those moments where I was bedridden, because I was like, no hangover makes you bedridden. You know, this was new. Like I.
So you got to the point, if you stopped drinking, your hands would start to shake and you'd sweat. Had you got to that point?
It was just like a kind of fever. That's what it felt like. So I was in bed with a kind of fever, and drinking more wasn't really working, and I just had to resign myself to, like, okay, you're going to be really uncomfortable for 24 hours. And it was in these moments of like horrible pain, like just you feel like you're going to die, and just thinking, I've got to stop. And so I started reading a lot about alcohol. I'm really into kind of science and cosmology and stuff, so I really respect scientists, and I knew that AA wasn't going to be the route for me. I don't know why, I just had a kind of feeling, and I know it's been wonderful for lots of people, including yourself, but I knew that I needed a different perspective, and so I've read everything, and this is while I was still drinking, you know, and so I was kind of learning about alcohol, what it does to you, what it's designed to do to you, and I just was like, God, this information, I had no idea, you know, this sort of drug that I've been idolizing, and I had no idea what it does, what it's made of, and how it affects the body. So when I got to the point of like, this is unsustainable, I slowly weaned myself off it. So I kind of gradually, so I said to my wife, right, I'm giving up alcohol, but you're going to have to give me a week to come off it, because I need to drink today. I will need to drink tomorrow, and I'll need to drink the day after. And then on the last day, I'll have 4 drinks, and I'll have them, you know, it was very meticulous how I did it, but it worked. And then I had my final drink, and then I, you know, spoke to the doctor, got into counseling, and I, you know, as they say, took each day as it came. But, you know, the actual effects of alcohol withdrawal were over pretty quickly. You know, it only takes a week or so for it all to kind of leave your system. And then it's just the psychological battle, which can last a hell of a lot longer, obviously. But I just read and read and read. I stayed away from pubs. I walked away from quite a few businesses, you know, hospitality businesses that I was involved with, and I just sort of took a year out. I didn't even have a non-alcoholic beer. I was just like, I want nothing to do with it at all. And kind of announced to everyone that I had a drink problem and I've given up, and this is my new life now. And then, like I said, it was just clear skies and everything in HD. And I was quite scared at first, but then I realized that I had no regrets. I didn't miss any aspect of it. In fact, quite the contrary. I just almost annoyed by myself for not doing it sooner, and for, you know, when you look in hindsight and say, I was avoiding being around my children in pursuit of this nonsensical poison. I just was like, there are no good qualities to alcohol for me, and good riddance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that. And if anyone's listening to this, I mean, this is quite obvious, but if you are thinking about detoxing physically from alcohol, obviously Rupert's only sharing his experience, and this isn't medical advice for anybody.
God, no.
And if anyone is in that situation where they want to withdraw from alcohol, please consult your GP, because everyone's bodies are different. And but thank you for sharing how you did it. And in that first year, I mean, you know, I find this fascinating that you're a publican and that you run pubs. So you're not anti-alcohol, are you? Clearly, like in terms of the general population. You know, I don't think you're sort of saying here that, you know, alcohol should be banned or anything like that. And I think that's quite a refreshing perspective, because sometimes when people hear kind of these recovery stories, they think it's like this anti-alcohol movement. I'm assuming you're not if you've got pubs and stuff.
No,
right?
and I think, my wife still drinks, and most of my family still drink, and I think most people can deal with it okay. I just think it needs, like with my children, for example, I'm never going to say to them, don't drink alcohol. But what I will do is say, be really mindful about it, because it needs to be respected. It's not a kind of, you don't go into it gung ho like I did. I just thought, I think, but what I do love is pubs. I think pubs are great, and I like the fact that that's where you go and meet people, and so I didn't want the booze to win that fight. So I was like, no, I really like pubs, so I'm going to go back to the pub, and I'm going to run pubs. I'm going to own pubs, and be sober. And my business partner Johnny, who I the three I've got now, he's sober as well, and so we're kind of like the sober landlords, and it's really interesting. And I think the alcohol-free contingent of stock now is really growing and just really incredible. I mean, and so we're really into like, sort of stocking that.
Wow. I mean, obviously, I don't want to sort of dive into your finer business details, because that's your personal information. But do you find sort of the sale of soft drinks and zero booze, if you like, as almost as profitable as the real stuff?
Yeah, well, it's certainly popular. And funnily enough, we've just taken on a new pub in Chorlton, the Lloyd's, and there was a bit of press interest when we took it on. In particular, because it's the two sober landlords who were taking it on, and we sort of said that we were going to pay particular attention to a kind of the non-alcohol selection that isn't just Coke and the usual things. We were trying to make some more interesting choices. And in actual fact, the most comments we had and the most messages we had were about that.
Yeah,
and I think it's just the popularity is growing and growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I keep banging on about this on the podcast, but, there's a latest stat, 18 to 25, 39% don't drink. I mean, the culture is changing, and that's not to say that alcohol won't always be part of culture and society. I think it will be, but this idea that you can be at a social function and have a soft drink, I think is becoming more and more normalized, and that idea of, what's wrong with you we talked about is starting to be eradicated. I was at an industry party a couple of years ago, and there was a load of champagne going around with waitresses and waiters, and then a load of elderflower, and half the room were drinking elderflower, and I remember just sat there going, this is wow, things really have changed. And this was at sort of like an industry acting type soiree. Just want to talk a little bit about, you've got this play coming up, right? I want to make sure I get it right. It's called HUSK, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And it's at the Hope Mill Theatre. Whereabouts is that? I've heard of it.
It's in Manchester, yeah. It's a great theatre, really great. It's quite small, very cute, kind of fringe theatre in Manchester, but they do incredible productions. They do a lot of musicals that end up like, going to the West End or touring the country. I mean, they're a real kind of success story. Yeah. A great theatre, and we're so lucky to be showing it there.
It's an amazing theatre. I just had a blank spot. I was like, I can't remember where in the country it is, but obviously that makes sense because that's where you are. Tell me a little bit about the play. What inspired it? What's it about? And how does it relate to your own personal journey, if it does?
Yeah, well, it was bizarrely, the play started off as a pitch for a TV series that I pitched to Red back in the day. And it was kind of it kind of is a revenge story, if you like. So a guy comes out of prison and he goes looking for the person responsible for putting him in there. But over the years, the guy that's responsible for him being in prison has now suffering with dementia, and his memory is not what it was. And so he's got this kind of, the protagonist who's seeking revenge has got this dilemma of like, I want to harm this person, but this person is deteriorating with this illness. So that's basically the premise. And, it's been through many different versions and whatnot. And then it was only recently when I started writing the stage version, and I was injecting a lot more into it and casting myself in the lead role, so to speak, that I realized, oh my God, this is all about alcohol. And, you know, this kind of prison where it's set, or where, you know, the character's been, is the prison of addiction, and being released from it, and is very much like being released from the prison of alcohol, and then this seeking revenge, and then maybe choosing not to, is kind of, you know, I feel like as a person I'm trying to see the clear blue skies and head towards them, rather than, you know, like dwelling on my crazy choices that I may have made when I was under the influence. And so, yeah, the play feels, you know, it's not directly about, I mean, the character does drink and does give up drink and is clearly an alcoholic, but it's not about that directly. But the kind of general thing of it is, yeah, something about releasing yourself from the prison.
Wow, that's amazing. When is it on? Has that been decided yet?
Yeah.
In terms of the dates?
Yeah, so it's at Hope Mill Theatre in Manchester the last week of September. Brilliant. And then it goes to Lancaster the following week, I think. Yeah, but that, I think I just need to wait for that to be confirmed, but that's the idea. And then we're hoping to bring it down to London at some point as well. So we'll see how it goes. But
I tell you what we'll do, guys. If you're listening or watching this, dive into the show notes and I'll keep them updated. If you let me know any change of dates, and then whoever's listening to this at any point in the future of the, you know, the ether of the internet, look down at the show notes and I'll make sure it's updated so they can find out where it might be on.
Yeah, great.
Which is really, really good. We're running out of time, which I'm gutted about. I just wanted to ask you one last little thing here. In terms of sort of like your maintenance, if you like, do you find that there's certain things that you have to do on a daily or weekly or monthly basis in terms of keeping away from the booze, or do you feel now that you're just kind of in a natural space where your brain's not thinking about it? I just wonder if there's anything that you consciously do now to kind of maintain, obviously, this great place that you're in currently.
Yeah, I definitely. I'm clearly a very addictive person, and now my thing is just running and exercise, and I love going to the gym, and I just kind of, I find it, I don't like going through the day without doing some sort of exercise now. And I find when I'm running again, I get that level of being present is really acute. I feel very zen when I'm running. Like I can do quite long distances, and I just get a overwhelming sense of pleasantness. You know what I mean? Like I just feel right. And again, going to the gym, I just enjoy it. And I think I'm trying to eat well and look after myself, because, you know, I don't want a kind of untimely death or anything like that. I mean, everything we do is in the face of the inevitable, and I'm just trying to, you know, stave that off for as long as possible by being present, being healthy. And, you know, I gave, you know, a quarter of my, you know, probably a third of my life to the drug, and now I'm like, now I want to reclaim and be as healthy as possible for the rest of my life, and try and develop relationships and friendships and be a good dad, and, you know, all of those things.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you feel like if you didn't exercise for a long period of time, that some sort of, the reason I ask you this is I play a lot of squash. I'm a bit addicted to squash. I play like 3 times a week. And I sort of feel if I don't play squash for, say, 2-3 weeks, there's this kind of like energy that builds up. And I think there's a bit of me that's like, I don't want that to build too big where I feel like reaching for a drink will get rid of it. I always used to call a drink back in the day like a blowout. I say, I need a blowout. Yeah. Like I need to release something. Yeah. Is that sort of where exercise comes in? Is it sort of about tension and sort of, I don't know, like expelling energy in a positive way?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's that, you know, the thing is, when you give up alcohol, you still have bad days. Yeah. And those bad days, you just drink through them, and that would be a way of kind of avoiding it. But then the next day you would have the problem plus the hangover. So it would be worse. So, but now I always feel better after exercising, no matter what. You know what I mean? So if I've got any kind of problem or issue going on in my life, which, let's be honest, there's normally something that's getting us down, it just always helps. And yeah, I just really, really enjoy it. But yeah, I think so. You need to get rid of that kind of stress, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I could have chatted to you for hours, Rupert. I mean, I can't believe, I don't know, 20 years. I can't even work it out. My head's hurting. I think it was like 2000. Yeah. I was there till you probably graduated in 99.
It was 2000, I think.
Or 2000. Yeah, you're right. 2000. So we're looking at, what, 24 years? This is crazy.
Crazy.
I think there was a reunion 4 years later. It's probably been about 20 years.
Yeah.
It's one thing I'm loving about this podcast is I'm meeting up with old friends. I'm meeting creatives that I didn't know, and it's been so great chatting to you and
yeah, same,
up, man.
Yeah, really nice.
And I just want to really congratulate you on everything that you're doing, not just your recovery, but you know, all the incredible stuff that you're doing within the industry and your businesses, and you know, it's just incredible the stuff you've got going on. So
thanks, man. Appreciate that.
It's really, really great, and I wish you continued success with everything you're doing as well.
Same to you.
Thank you, Rupert. I appreciate that. And as I said earlier, guys, head to the show notes for much more on Rupert, where to follow him on social media, where the show is at. Wherever you're watching or listening to this, please subscribe, follow, rate, leave a review. It really helps the algorithm. And as I always promise, and I've not let you down yet, I will see you, come rain or shine, in 2 weeks' time. Until then, look after yourself and see you soon.